r/AskReddit posted by user/anthem29. Serious, hikers, campers, woodsmen and the like, what are your scariest experiences in the woods? This will probably get buried, but 2 years ago, myself and 2 other people were camping in Yellow Bottom, which is in the Cascades of Oregon. About 3 AM I woke up hearing what sounded like a bunch of people having a campfire party. Nothing huge, not even scary, just talking, laughing, stuff like that. I was kind of pissed, since we'd specifically come up to get away from the college kids and such, and now somebody had set up camp what sounded like less than 100 yards away. But I couldn't see fire or light through the tent walls, and since that was my big concern, fire in the woods, I just kind of ground my teeth about it and went back to sleep. About an hour later, I wake up again. This time somebody's let a little kid start crying, and it's really annoying. Like, not wailing but just sniffles, that long-term crying that kids do. I listen for about 5 minutes, and since I'm not a monster, I've kind of got this prickly feeling that maybe there's trouble. You know, little kid crying all alone, where the hell are its parents, etc. I started to get up and my friend, who I though was sleeping, grabs my arm, just about giving me a heart attack, and says don't go out there. Just wait. He knows the woods better than me, and he sounded actually scared. So I sit and wait, and yeah, a few minutes later, the crying stops and the party starts back up. But the weird this is, I can't really pinpoint now what direction the party is coming from, because I was trying to tell if maybe it was a group who had found the kid and now they were all talking together, but I couldn't tell what direction it was from. The party went on for about another hour, just until dawn, then all of a sudden, nothing. Like, cut off in the middle of a laugh silence. I was completely freaked out by then, and I think I might have made a noise when it just stopped like that. My friend, who hadn't even sat up the entire time, just said stick engines, and then rolled over, and fell back asleep. I got up, when the sun was finally completely up, and made coffee and kind of looked around, but I'm not brave like that, and didn't go far. But there was nothing. No campfire, not tents I could see through the trees, nothing. We packed up that day and I asked him what a stick Indian was, and he wouldn't tell me. Had to come back and Google it, and even now I'm not sure if what's online is true or made up, or what, but if you look it up, apparently it's some kind of yak in a forest spirit that lures people out by making noises like crying babies or people having a party and then, I don't know, eats them, or something. So that's my creepy thing in the woods. I don't have any proof, but people who know the Pacific Northwest, it was way up Yellow Bottom, past the official camps, on the left-hand fork of the main road, down that logging road and right by the river. The campsite with the huge fallen over dead trees. That one. Me, I've never been back up there. No sir. Okay, so my father and I were up there with his girlfriend and her 2 kids. It was late afternoon and the door was open, because it was a nice day. Since my father's girlfriend Kathy was making delicious smelling enchiladas, in hindsight that was probably a dumb idea. Anyways, we sat down to dinner, and in walks this goddamn bear. Cue lots of screaming from us kids as everyone leaps to their feet. Kathy was the only one to act Mama Bear v Bear, and she grabbed her chair like a lion tamer and screamed back bear, back as she advanced towards it. The bear was like oh shit what the fuck and backed up out of the cabin onto the porch which is when Kathy slammed the door shut and locked it, lol. The bear hung around for like an hour. We watched it through the windows as it lumbered over to the chaise lounge where my dad napped earlier that day. It began to gnaw on and maul his pillow, all while my dad stood there murmuring Jesus Christ it likes my smell over and over again. My dad is a big, burly, no nonsense guy, but he was completely freaked out, lol. And that's my bear story. Fuck bears, man, they don't even knock. I was hunting a big field for whitetail. It was public land and I decided not to set up a tree stand and just sit behind some heavy cover on the ground. I try to get to my spots well before sunup, so I'm not making noise at first light when many deer start to move. I got to my spot at about 5 AM. It was absolutely pitch black and all I had was my headlamp. After I switched off my headlamp, it was quiet for about 30 seconds when suddenly I heard a howl from my right side. It was clear the howl came from the edge of the field I was in, roughly 200 yards away. It sent shivers down my spine. About 30 seconds passed when I heard a second howl in the opposite direction, on the other end of the field, probably 200 yards the other way. At this point I'm pretty freaked out, but I figure it's highly unlikely anything would attack me. Not much longer, and from directly behind me, somewhere in the thick of the woods, a third howl. I now feel surrounded, and I'm terrified. My truck was about 500 yards away to my left, along the edge of the woods in the field, and down a narrow path that cuts right through the woods. I flicked on my headlamp, took the safety off my gun, equipped my hunting knife, and got the fuck out as fast as I could. I waited until the sun came up before I went back and actually hunted. I never saw a deer that entire weekend. I presume whatever was howling drove the deer out, and I don't blame the deer one bit. The entire experience was very scary, and I've done a lot of hunting, camping, etc. I've spent a ton of time in the woods both during the day and night, and nothing has ever freaked me out so bad. Edit, I do believe it was wolf, not coyotes. The area doesn't hold a lot of wolves, but it is known to have some. I know the difference between a wolf and coyote howl. I'll just admit I was so freaked out maybe I thought it sounded like wolves, and convinced myself of it. Oh, I have so many of these. I'm expecting a bunch of bear and wolf stories in this thread, so how about a moose story? So there's this island in Lake Superior called Isle Royale. This island really cool, because it is full of wolves and moose that supposedly walked to it when Lake Superior was frozen over a long time ago. But there are no bears. So when you go there your bear protection can be fairly lax. For our group, that meant we could hike in relative quiet without fear of surprising a bear. So along the entire length of the island is this big ridge line, and it was awesome hiking. One day as we were walking along this ridge we hear some rustling to our right, at the base of the ridge, and when we look to see what it was we see two baby moose, but no mama moose. Now this is true of just about every animal I have ever encountered, but moose are very protective of their young. So seeing these baby moose, but not their mom, was pretty strange. But as we are watching the baby moose do their thing, we hear huffing from the other side of the ridge. Turning around we see the mama moose on the other side of the ridge. So we are at the top of this ridge standing directly between the mama moose and her babies. And the mama moose is just staring at us. Now this part of the ridge was fairly rocky, so to keep walking we would have needed to start walking directly toward the baby moose. Clearly this wasn't the option to take. Instead, all we could do was sit down on the top of the ridge and wait and hope the moose would leave soon. So we sit down, hoping to get low enough that the mama moose can't see us over the ridge line, and we wait, listening to the mama moose and her babies on either side of us. Eventually we couldn't hear them anymore, so we assume they left, and we get up and keep walking, and we don't see them again. But for the rest of the trip we were constantly looking around to stay out of the way of any more moose. Will be buried, don't care. I used to live in the woods. Good distance from town, no cell service, no internet, not even a landline or satellite. I lived there for a year, and it was pleasant initially, but became a nightmare. By the end of my residency I was a shell of who I was. It broke me. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm not a stranger to nature. Because of this, I didn't mind taking night hikes. No bears in the area, few coyotes, rarely mountain lions. Even still, I would carry a pistol just in case. I lived basically at the base of a mountain. First thing, every full moon I'd climb to the top of the mountain, because the moon would be bright enough for me not to need lights. It was always pleasant, and I'd have a flask of whiskey to help keep warm and plenty of cigarettes. I called it my werewolf hike, and it was usually a 7-hour round trip. There weren't any trails, so I'd just go up and usually ended up taking a pretty usual route that I'd grown accustomed to. This time I went up I had brought my girlfriend at the time. She is deathly afraid of mountain lions, so she had me take my shotgun with us as a condition for her joining me. It wasn't cloudy when we departed my home, but was pouring by the time we were making our way down, and I got lost. I ended up following a ravine down, because I knew it would likely end up at a creek I lived by. GF and I came to a point where we needed to descend into the ravine to continue following it, but it was a steep decline. I tried to come down diagonally, but the rain-soaked ground came out from under me. I slid about 6 feet, then fell straight down about 10 feet. Hit my head on some rocks, landed square on my shotgun, and was buried in the earth falling from above me. That gave away. I woke up shortly after to a hysterical girlfriend freaking out over me. She helped me up, and I wrapped my bloody hands with a combination of extra socks and a bandana I had in my pack. My shotgun was okay though. By Mossberg. I felt drunk after the fall and was stumbling around clumsily, but continued on. About 30 minutes down the ravine, my girlfriend asks me if I smelled a skunk. I'm a smoker, but the heavy wet air carried the smell of weed easily to us. To set the picture, right when the clouds come out there is no moon. We were navigating by feel at the point, not using lights as there were properties scattered around with crazy rednecks and whatnot. There was very little light. As we approach the smell, we see jagged rubber stabbed into either side of the ravine, with deer skulls impaled on them and furry, decomposed carcasses littering the ground below them. The weed smell is super strong at this point, and curiosity and confidence got the best of me. I climb up a low part of the ravine and see the most glorious, lavish, outdoor weed grow. It was almost funny how tightly the plants were growing to each other and how bushy they were. We noped the fuck out of there, with my shotgun unslung the rest of the way back. A few weeks after, I decide I want to find this farm again on a full moon night. Don't know why, I was bored out there, don't judge me. I go alone, because my girlfriend is timid. I tried to retrace my steps from the rainy night, and happened across one of the few dirt roads. I follow the road for maybe 20 minutes to the south, where I believed the farm was, until I heard an engine some distance behind me. I hop off the road and wait for what ended up being an ATV/gasoline golf car thing to come along. Sitting on it were two fat, huntin' camo wearing, sister fucking rednecks, both armed with AR-15s, and all I had was a pistol. Mind you, my pistol was carried because of mountain lions, and I would never ever want to use it for people. If I knew these dudes were even in the area, I wouldn't have tried to seek out their opus. Again with the curiosity and confidence, I follow their trail. I smell the farm and cautiously approach, but I heard nothing. I was a bit behind them, after all. And just like that, my world lit up, and I hear screaming. I drop from my low crouch to lay down, and put my hand on my pistol. Turns out, these fucking guys had lighting stapled up through the trees about 20 feet up, and they were cheering when they got their generator running to turn them on. I backed out slowly, and took note of where the farm was. I had no intention to steal any. I have never had a problem with the morality of weed, and had no intention of reporting them. At this point in my life I didn't smoke a whole lot. I suppose I just liked poking my nose where it didn't belong. A few months after, I ended up finding out those guys lived about 4 miles up my road. They were brothers, and liked to smoke a bit of ganja, and were very open that they grew. Actually really nice dudes. Smoked and hung out with them a lot, and eventually told them about that night. I also had a mountain lion stalk me around my house for months. I'd hear it circle my house late at night, climb the tree next to my house, and jump onto my roof. Sometimes it would jump onto my high-rise back porch and stare into the sliding glass door. The first night he did that was the first night I knew he was around. I thought it was a person trying to break in. I screamed my head off, with a surefire and pistol in hand. I can fucking see you. Lay on the ground right now, or I will fucking drop you. Through the curtain of the sliding door, I couldn't see it, but could hear it. When I ripped open the shades I was met with two giant eyes. We looked at each other a bit, and I contemplated blowing the thing away through the glass door. I regret not doing it. This asshole terrorized me and my dog for months. Snarling outside my window at 3 AM when it saw my dog inside, sitting in the trees on my property at night when I got home. Fuck, I had to chaperone my dog on potty breaks with a 12 gauge because the cougar thought he was a Scooby snack. One day, he wasn't creeping around anymore, and I never saw him after that, but always felt the eyes on me. By this point, because of the 50-yard walk from my parking spot to my front door, I was strapped with my pistol. When I was home I was carrying. When I was walking to or from my car, I was carrying. When my nearest neighbor got a divorce, her ex-husband was convinced 21-year-old me was sleeping with his 60-something-year-old ex-wife. He was a hitter and eventually she kicked him out of their house. This guy was convinced she left him for me. She was just sick of getting slapped around. Still, I'd hear his 1980 300 Mercedes turbo diesel creep past my house late at night and park in the turnout by my house. He'd stay there all night apparently to see if she was leaving my house in the morning or if I was leaving hers. He'd leave weird notes on my door, even knocked on it at 4 AM one night to have a beer with me. She eventually moved, so he stopped stalking her and consequently me as well. There was an abandoned house next to mine. It had burned down a decade ago and was basically a shell. Falling in roof, partial walls, holes in the floors. Straight out to the fallout wasteland. Once my dog got out of my yard and ran in there to play like an idiot. I chased him in, not realizing I had stumbled into a horror movie with the haunted house. I come walking into this shanty, shouting his name. I swear I became self-aware and could hear the people in the movie theater screaming, "Don't go in there, you idiot." I heard his collar jingling as he ran around, but couldn't see him. I heard him yelp, and his collar wasn't jingling anymore. I bust out a light and go back home to grab my gun as I figured the mountain lion had come back. Turns out there was a ring-style 18th century well in the crawl space that he fell into. It was only like 8 feet, so I set up a rope, jumped in, got him out, then climbed out myself. There were scratch marks in the stones from the animals that had been trapped in there before, and their bones covered in dirt on the floor. I was happy to leave. Then there was that one time I got dosed with LSD without knowing it and shot at a demon crawling through my window, but that's a whole different story. Oh god. Dry Creek broke me. I literally got cabin fever. First backpacking trip without my parents. I was 11. Had just started scouts. Had read the book front to back repeatedly. I was armed with all the knowledge. Bear bags, snake bites, fish hook removal. I was ready. Long day of backpacking. Got to the campsite. Did normal scout things. Went to bed. I was bushed. Woke up early in the morning. It was still dark. And I heard a bear snarl. Froze in my sleeping bag. Bear snarled again. I did not move. Was planning on how I was going to get to my pocket knife if it attacked through the tent. I knew there was no food or toothpaste in my gear. I'd put it all up in the bear bag like a good scout, but my tent compatriot must have not been such a sterling example of an outdoorsman as I, and now we were doomed to death by mauling. That bear snarled around for ages. I didn't move a bit. I barely breathed. The sun started to come up. The bear was still snarling around. And then my scoutmaster woke up and stopped snoring. This happened after my hunt for some whitetail in northern Michigan. I was leaving the woods and heading for my car for the long ride home. The sun was setting and the air was crisp, the smell of fall in the air. As I got to my car, I heard some rustling in the brush on the other side of the trail I was parked on. Thinking it was an animal, I looked across and saw a guy standing there. He was slightly swaying from side to side. Not a drunk sway, but more of an impatient standing in line for a long time type of sway. I said, "Hey man, you lost." He didn't answer, but he gave the creepiest smirk and tilted his head back slightly without taking his eyes off of me. Needless to say, I was creeped the fuck out. My guns made me feel protected, but as I loaded my pack and my shotgun in the car, I didn't take my eyes off of him, and he kept his locked on mine. I kept my 9mm on me in case he tried something. I was parked parallel to the trail, so when I got in the car, I could still see him. I drove and checked my mirror. He was in the middle of the trail just walking in my direction. That was the creepiest day hunting I have ever had. Alright. So my dad and I had been hiking out in Colorado, and on this day we were doing the Shavano-Tabaguash Pear, which to anyone accustomed to climbing 14ers knows, isn't very difficult, just a fun day hike. As the sun came up we noticed it was completely cloud covered, but figured they'd all burn off in a few hours. As the day goes on we summit both peaks, and are coming back to Shavano completely engulfed in the sheet of clouds. Visibility was a good 10 feet maximum. Now I say the difficulty isn't bad, but as we are making our way down Shavano back to tree line we end up coming down the opposite side of the mountain. Now we make it down about 2,000 feet before we finally notice something's wrong. Just then, the clouds decided it was time to start pouring on us, with the fog only getting worse. As we come down further, the incline starts getting relatively steep, and we decide the best move is turn around and go back up to the saddle and cross back into the valley we came up on. Very stupid decision. We make it about 1,000 feet back up, and we still can't see the top anywhere in sight, and the several ton boulders we've been climbing up are hella slick and are starting to shift with all the rain still pouring. I finally decide it's time to try and call S&R. After spending 30 minutes trying to get a signal, we manage to get a hold of them, and they say all we can do is go all the way down this valley and hike through the woods for several miles until we'll run into the Colorado Trail. They had no way of reaching us. At this point I tell my dad, at least there's no lightning, and just like that a few hundred feet away strikes the first bolt, and from then on we were in a full-on thunderstorm, 1,500 feet above tree line on the side of a mountain. So then we freak the fuck out and start running down the mountain, not caring about falling or slipping. We managed to make it down to Shavano Lake without anything more than a few scrapes and bruises, and we think hell yeah we did. Now just a quick walk in the woods back to camp. And I'm not gonna go much more into detail, but that woods walk ended up being another 5 hours in the pouring near freezing rain. I will never forget how good the shower felt that night. Edit. Sorry about the shoddy formatting and grammar. You just gotta roll with it. I was in Denali National Park 2 years ago with my now wife and 2 other friends. If you aren't familiar with it, it is a trailless wilderness. That means there aren't trailheads or marked trails, and if you find social or game trails you are encouraged to avoid them to keep the wilderness as pristine as possible. You are given a backcountry permit to a unit, which is a large division of the park, and has a limited number of campers in it. You get on the bus that goes on the one road through the park, and it drops you off when it is going through access to your assigned unit. Then it drives away, and you are in the middle of nowhere. It is amazing and intimidating at the same time. Anyway, we backpack for 2 amazing days, and have yet to see any wildlife other than the local ptarmigans. On the morning of the last day the others are drinking coffee and we are preparing to break camp. I'm looking down in the river valley that our campsite has a view of. We hadn't seen other humans for 48 hours, and I think I see some campers hiking through the brush in the distance. I call out, and the hikers turns out to be a bull moose who pops his head up and looks at us. We then start watching him as he walks along the river and slowly makes his way towards our camp. He's not coming up here, I say to the group. Well, he was. He climbed the hill and walked right into our campsite. We gave him a wide berth as he approached. Moose are the only animals you run from in Denali if they are being aggressive, and he froze and eyeballed us for a while. Then he continued up the side of the mountain. It was scary as hell, but he was majestic as duck. Anyway, it starts to pour on us as we finishing breaking camp, and we decide to save some time by following a game trail for a bit as we are soaked and cold. This saved us lots of time bushwhacking through alders and whatnot. Well, we round a corner and the trail comes to a dead end in what was the remains of a bear kill site. Bones of a moose, flattened down brush, old scat. Let me tell you, that is an unnerving feeling. We freeze, the blood drains out of our faces. We look at each other and instantly agree to double back a bit and start our bushwhacking again to get out of Dodge. It was an epic trip and I highly recommend it if you have any backpacking experience. If not, camp near the ranger station and do some day hikes. Here are some shots from Unit 4. Here is the bull moose and he crested the hill into camp. If you like what I'm doing, consider subscribing to Reddit Thief for more Reddit TTS. Have a nice day.